Hello and welcome to another Tuesday with Convergent Technologies Group. I'm Jeff Gorell. With me today is Jeff Joyner. Once again, we're going to be talking about some interesting Wi-Fi topics and things to think about. Things like, do you really need to upgrade your wireless if it's still working? It's 5-10 years old and, still chugging right along. The reasons why you need to consider it, why you should do it. We're going to cover how to plan for it too, because it's not the same old wireless that you used to know. So Jeff, when we start talking about old wireless networks, what are some of the things that really drive why we need to think about upgrading or replacing our wireless?
Well, there's the APs themselves, and then there can be a discussion about controllers. But we'll kind of, I think it's probably easier just to stick with APs at the moment. So there's from a security standpoint, over the years, there was a WPA was one of the early standards. It is pretty widely recommended not to use WPA because it's not secure. It's been broken pretty easily. WPA2 has been the standard for quite some time, but there's a WPA3 now, which there's manufacturers that are out there that you can use WPA3. However, WPA3 is not. It's not necessarily been incorporated into new wireless user devices. So, you have to have a mesh of the two. They have to be talking the same language. But there are security enhancements in WPA3, and as well as in the open, for an open SSID, there's, I think it's O&E, that gives you some encryption capabilities that you didn't have before in a traditional open network.
Okay.
So there's a security aspect there. There's the ever-changing 802.11 standards for the transmission. I'm sure everybody knows about 802.11a, B, G. Those were early standards. Then came along N, which where A was 5 gigahertz, B and G were 2.4. N actually incorporated both 5 and 2.4 and 5. Then you had AC, and now AX is a standard in there. But there's more. I'm not sure if it's AZ that's the next one, but there's the devices that end users have, whether it be laptops, tablets, or phones, they change fairly frequently. I mean, laptops maybe not as often, tablets fairly frequently, and phones, it seems like, depending on who you talk to, they're changing their phones out I swear it sounds like sometimes almost 6 months. It's crazy. Yeah. At least once a year. I mean, and if you're upgrading to a new user device that has new capabilities, but your underlying infrastructure, the APs that these devices are talking to, if they don't have that same technology, then you're holding back your user devices. So having that older equipment in there that's talking to these user devices, can hold back your speeds. It can hold back the number of devices you're connecting, that can connect on the APs. Because another aspect of this is access points they have processors, and as wireless use has evolved, when I first started playing around with wireless, wireless was more of a fun thing. It was neat. Hey, I can go and
it's a nice convenience.
Exactly. And then it kind of moved over to, you had some people that or some companies that may want to use wireless in a boardroom because it made it easier for everybody to come in and not have to plug in. It's aesthetically pleasing, but to today where wireless is expected most places.
Right. And there's so many more wireless things, right? I mean, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, they were talking about, every employee having 3 devices, their laptop, their phone, their tablet. And then that's even expanded even more because now you might have a work phone and a personal phone. You might have and then there's IoT, right? Video cameras, security systems, building access control kind of things, or even just printers, right? I mean, printers are getting dropped and placed anywhere because they can connect to Wi-Fi. I mean, there's just a lot more things now needing to connect to Wi-Fi than there were, again, just 5 years ago.
Right, and it's cheaper to drop in, say, one of these wireless printers or the wireless security cameras than having network drops, especially if you already have a wiring plant that has been installed and you found out, okay, well, I put 2 drops in this area and actually I needed 3 or I needed 4. Right. If you have wireless, then you can utilize that wireless, but your back end infrastructure has to be able to handle this, the speed, the bandwidth, and then also the number of connections. Because I mean, both are important.
I imagine dumping to a printer, for example, is probably a lot more of a steady burst, at least during the send time, than, say, browsing the web from your phone or your whatever. And so you've got to be able to take that kind of capacity or bandwidth into account to kind of steal some wired network words. And because you don't want to drop your connections because somebody printed the telephone book. Not that there's those anymore, but
right. Yeah, whenever you're playing wireless, you need to think about where I guess what you're going to be using it for, how many users you're going to have, what type of usage, and there are planning applications out there. We happen to have one that we love that when you're putting all this together, you can take into consideration not just how many devices, but what type these devices are and what is the utilization. Is this going to be, are we looking at devices that are going to be doing background synchronizations, which may be pretty low? Where are you going to have, just normal email and some web? Are you going to be doing some streaming media? Are you do you have some do you need to plan for low latency for voice, because people are using voice.
Right. And so that brings up another really good point is if you're looking to replace your 5 to 10-year-old wireless stuff, it's not a good idea just to stick the new APs where the old APs were.
Yeah, like I said, we were talking about earlier that you have, as this wireless evolution is taking place, maybe what was planned for in what infrastructure you have today may have been more, hey, I just want to be able to connect, and if my speed is is okay, or maybe you planned for, this is back in the 2.4 range, or when 2.4 was more popular, where now you're planning for 5. 5 does not, because of the, and not to get into the physics too much about the radio waves, but 5 does not penetrate material like walls, as well as 2.4. So your range on 5 it's a smaller pattern, which means that you're going to have a denser population of APs, which presents other problems in that you're overlapping channels with 5 versus 2.4. You have fewer with 2.4, so you may even get to the point where you have to turn off some 2.4 radios, which may sound silly, but it actually turning off radios, disabling a 2.4 radio can provide you better coverage in that denser population to keep you from, from having overlap or co-channel interference.
Right, and it's not just guesswork and we'll move things around, because I mean you do have to have a wire somewhere for that AP to connect to.
Yes.
And so I mean I know we've got tools to build out heat maps, for example. So if we get building drawings, we can take those drawings, as long as we know what the walls are made of and blah blah blah, you're able to drop APs in and move them around virtually. And
so there's two types of surveys that can be done. There's predictive, which is you don't do that on, you don't need to, or don't, you don't have to be on site to do that. It is very important to always have scale drawings, because your survey and the information, the reporting that you're going to get back about your wireless coverage is, I mean, think about it like, you're building, I'm going to be building a workbench soon. If you don't have good drawings or good measurements, maybe one side of my workbench legs are going to be shorter than the other, and that's not really going to be a good looking workbench or very effective.
Be a good pine wood derby bench though.
So, having scale drawings is extremely important. And so in the predictive, you go in and you do draw in those walls, and it's also important to have a good idea, because different material has different dB loss, and that dB loss is going to affect the coverage pattern of any of those APs. And so knowing whether your walls are hollow drywall, or are they plaster, which is going to have
wood studs or metal studs, are they,
or are they, is it brick walls or concrete? You're not going to have too good a coverage in an elevator shaft. They're pretty thick. So, but knowing all that and being able to put the software is able to take all of that into consideration, as well as the RF patterns for those APs. And when you put them in place, I mean, it takes into account everything. And in fact, it can even do 3D calculations to figure out how much bleed you might get from floor to floor. There's height parameters to think about. How high is the AP off the floor? Are we talking about a standard 8-foot ceiling, 10-foot ceiling? We're talking about a warehouse where it may be 30 or 40 feet in the air. I mean, these are all things,
big atrium, or
all stuff that needs to be considered. And so there's predictive, and that gives you a good baseline or good idea of what that AP, or what your AP plan should be. Once those APs are put in place, then you can do a site survey. And a site survey does require you to be on site, because you have to actually see or let your devices hear that RF to know, where at in the building, and it kind of validates your plan, your predictive, to show where, that you have nice even coverage, or maybe there's something you didn't consider, and you end up having light coverage or a dead spot somewhere, and you need to fix that. It's good to get that all nailed down in the beginning, before you have end users start getting a negative feeling about their wireless experience.
Sure, and it also provides almost like an as-built, right? So here's what it looked like after we put it in, and now 6 months to a year later, your users are reporting, the one corner of the building is dropping connections, or not even able to connect. And I mean, that helps troubleshoot as well, right? Maybe one of these APs has gone down.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so you walk over.
I've done a site survey to find out problems. And then as I'm doing the walk around, I find out that, hey, yeah, there's a dead spot right here. And of course the customer says, well, there shouldn't be. I mean, there's an AP right there. And we look up and there's, or sometimes APs are put up above or inside the plenum on the other side of the ceiling tile, and you don't see the lights. And you go drop that AP down, and you find out, oh, it's
Off.
powered off. It could be the AP's gone bad. I'm not a huge fan of PoE injectors, but sometimes you need to put those in place, and PoE injectors can go bad. So, there's the predictive gives you a good plan where the on-site actually tells you what is going on, what is being seen live. And in addition to that, you can even back that up with some RF analysis, which takes into account not just the wireless, but also what other RF interferers might be out there.
Right. Who's got a microwave tower, a mile away, pointed right at your building.
Or some other device that is broadcasting in that same range. It's not to say that that you have to remove that device, but you need to plan around it.
Right.
So
nice. So those are some of the things we need to take into consideration as you look at new Wi-Fi. As you should start considering new Wi-Fi if you've got an old setup. Again, if your users are starting to complain, we can use the on-site survey to maybe help identify some of the problems. If you're ready for new, we can use predictive to decide where to put things, make it better. But the first thing you got to do is give us a call, 804-353-5307, or email sales@ctgva.com. Thank you, Jeff. That was good, informative.
thank you.
Hope everyone has a good day.